On the night of February 18th, 2009, it was a Wednesday evening. My wife and I are both teachers. We were on winter recess that week. So approximately around 10:15, I was bathing my son and the fire alarm went off. It was a routine traffic accident.
When he left for the call, any wife of a chief says, "Do you really have to go? Don't go." My son said the same thing, and he said, "I'll be right back. I won't be long."
Being a volunteer, when the alarm goes off, it's just duty calls. You know, you do what you have to do. I got into my chief's truck. The road conditions were very icy. I responded to the scene. I was heading down the road. The dispatcher called me and said there was no need for the fire department, so I immediately responded back via radio to the dispatcher and stated to hold our engine in quarters. I went from code 3, which is lights and sirens, to code 2 response, which is no lights and sirens. I was continuing my response to the scene, and that's the last I remember.
Stand by, Clinton Heights Fire Department. Ready for a rescue squad. Rescue 6-2, traffic accident with injuries, a rollover. Red Mill Road at Robin Lane. Time is 22:20, dispatcher 6.
There was pounding on my window and my door.
There was a million and one things going through my mind.
I thought it was Ed just goofing around like he normally does.
What am I going to say to his wife?
When I went to go answer the door, it was the chief of the fire department.
My full-time employment, I'm a police officer, and this is probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do.
He said, "Your husband's been in a car accident in the chief's vehicle, and we're going to head up to the emergency room. Let's go." And he said that the road conditions were horrible. While responding, his truck went off the road and his truck flipped, and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. There was no airbag deployment, and it's not good. He's in rough shape.
Steve Car 1, extrication complete, packing the patient at this time, 22:35.
On the way to the hospital, the first thing that went through my mind after hearing the chief describe his apparent condition was, what am I going to do without my husband, and what is my son going to do without a dad? And the whole trip, I just begged and begged that it'd be okay. I prayed the entire way. And it was the longest trip ever. I didn't think we'd ever get there. When I saw him at first, I was a disaster. I was a wreck. The hospital was immediately just rushed with firefighters and police officers and nurses that were friends of firefighters and police officers, and they all just rushed to my side and said, "You don't have to do this alone. We're all right here." When I entered the ER, I went right into where they were treating him, and I said, "Hi, it's Meg. It's going to be okay. I'm right here, right here." And he looked up and said, "Who's Meg?" They were asking him at the time, "What year is it, sir? Do you know where you are?" And he responded it was 1995. And of course, I just broke down. That was a very, very rough night, the night of the accident. Very long night. I had the chief by my side every second. He refused to leave the hospital. He stayed right by my side when my husband was moved to a hospital room and was more set up with everything. There came a time finally when I was just so exhausted I had to leave. I had to go home and take a nap. And so many people graciously took over and sat by my husband's bedside 24/7. If a nurse or a doctor came in, they wrote down notes of what was said, what was done, what medicine he took. And I was never left out of a situation for having to go home and get some sleep. So I either had a firefighter in the chair next to him, a police officer. There was someone always there. As I stayed at the hospital with my husband for the next 4 days, our 5-year-old Nicholas was cared for by other family members, and slowly things started to come out of what was on his mind and how this was all affecting him. one of the first things that he said to another family member was, "My daddy's been in a car accident and he's dead." The weeks that followed after the accident, Nicholas acted out. In school, in daycare, he was just a wreck. He actually had a little altercation with another friend at school, and the little boy in turn asked our son, "Who are you mad at? Why are you mad at me? Why are you pushing me?" And he said, "I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at my daddy. I'm really mad at my daddy because he didn't wear a seatbelt. And I'm safe. Why wasn't my daddy safe that night?" And, and being in a great school environment, they talk about safety all the time. And we buckle up our son every day. And he knows that. And he knows to wear a helmet when he rides a bike. And he just couldn't understand the fact that Daddy didn't buckle up. And he had heard me talk to other members of the fire company about the seatbelt and how it could have impacted his life or death. And it was not until that day at school that he finally came out and said what was bothering him. And his words were, "Why wasn't my daddy wearing a seatbelt?"
The next thing that I remember is pretty much the last day of coming home from the hospital, which I do not recall how long I was at the hospital, but I remember leaving the hospital, how beautiful of a day it was out, and the car ride home.
Being so busy before with his schedules, he immediately wanted to jump into action. At his first rehab appointment, the therapist asked him, "So what's your injury? Are you aware of what happened? And, how long do you think getting better is going to take?" And he jokingly looked at the therapist and laughed and said, "I'm going to be out of this place in a week." And the therapist and I had to say, "No, you're not going to be out of here in a week. And it's going to take a long, long time to get better."
My wife and I have spent many, many hours of traveling to rehab, going to rehab, over 64 appointments in the month of March alone, going to occupation therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, to get everything back the way it was before the accident. So it's definitely brought me from, I would say, 0 to where I am today, about 90%, but it's definitely helped. In New York State, first responders are exempt from the seatbelt law. Police, fire, EMS are all exempt. It depends on the department policies and procedures and guidelines. That evening, responding to a fire call, I was not wearing my seatbelt. I was not required by our department nor by law to wear it.
Shortly after Ed came home from the hospital, he was sleeping a lot just to heal, and I was up a lot, thinking about a lot, and one thing I decided to do was research, this whole seatbelt culture issue of why first responders don't wear their seatbelts most of the time. And, and being married to him for 9 years and just watching him run out the door and go to a call, I know he's probably not buckling up, and I know other people that are first responders are not thinking about their own safety. They're thinking about who they're going to go save. And I think that's probably the first thing on their mind. The radio starts, they just jump in the vehicle and they start talking, they start responding, and it's not about them, it's about somebody else. And in finding information, I went to a site for the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And I had on that website looked at some training materials, some PowerPoint presentations, and most importantly, what caught my eye was the seatbelt pledge. And it's just an act of, I guess, a movement that any fire company can do to, at a drill night, at a meeting night, if you could just talk about how do we keep ourselves safe so we can go to that call. We can help and do what we do every single day, but we get to go home to our families, that same night. So the chief of our department surprised me the other day by telling me that he had already acted upon my wishes, and he had talked about the seatbelt pledge at a meeting, and many of our members have already signed it, which I was just elated about.
not only are they in our operating guidelines, but Ed's wife, Meg, actually showed me the seatbelt pledge. And all the members either have or are signing this pledge to wear their seatbelts.
Where I am today is, from the beginning, is definitely a great success. I mean, I have come a long way. I've even noticed myself along with other people, and one of my mottos pretty much from the beginning was that I want to get better. I want to be back to the way I was. And that's the road that I'm taking. And every day I wake up, and a new motto that I came up with was every day is a new day. So we're moving forward. We're doing very well.
God willing, you'll be the next chief.
I'd like to say to other chiefs that if there's any doubt in your mind that the members, your firefighters, your line officers may resent you for enforcing these issues, think about them and their families. 5 minutes of disagreement may save a life.
I hope when firefighters or other first responders view our story, I hope that you look at a picture of your family, of your kids, and I hope before you jump in the car, the truck, the fire engine, just stop and take a moment to think about the house that you just left. To continue to do your job well, just take an extra second to think about yourself and get to that call safely and do what you do best and come home to your family.